When we approach the question of nutrition in relation to the developing child, and especially the hypersensitive child, we must first free ourselves from the modern habit of thinking of food merely as a collection of chemical substances. From a spiritual scientific perspective, food is a bearer of formative forces, and the way these forces are taken up by the child depends not only on digestion, but on the entire relationship between body, soul, and spirit. In early childhood, nourishment works far more deeply into the organism than later in life, because the child has not yet fully separated itself inwardly from its bodily processes. What an adult experiences as digestion, the child experiences as something that reaches into feeling, mood, and even character. In the first years of life, the etheric body is chiefly occupied with building and shaping the physical organism. Nutrition serves this task directly. Substances are not merely broken down and distributed, they are transformed into forces of growth, warmth, and inner cohesion. For sensitive children, whose etheric body is often especially active and mobile, this process can easily become imbalanced. If the food is too stimulating, too refined, or too lifeless, the etheric body is either overdriven or weakened. In the first case, the child becomes restless, excitable, and inwardly overawake. In the second, withdrawn, tired, or lacking inner resistance. Modern hypersensitivity often arises because the child's astral body is drawn too early into metabolic processes. Instead of remaining primarily a bearer of sensation and later consciousness, it is forced to intervene in digestion and assimilation. This leads to a state in which impressions from the outer world penetrate too strongly, because the astral body has already been overburdened inwardly. Nutrition plays a decisive role here. Food that demands excessive astral activity in digestion through artificial stimulation, extreme sweetness, or overly processed substances weakens the child's capacity to meet the world calmly and securely. For sensitive children, it is therefore not a question of eliminating all challenges, but of strengthening the bodily foundations, so that the soul does not have to compensate for physical imbalance. Simple, rhythmically prepared food supports the etheric body in its formative work. Warm meals, regular times, and easily digestible substances help the child's organism to find inner order. This order does not suppress sensitivity. Rather, it gives it a stable ground. Sensitivity then becomes perception rather than vulnerability. Another essential aspect lies in how food connects the child to gravity and the earth. Hypersensitive children often have difficulty fully entering the physical body. They remain, as it were, slightly above themselves. Substances that support grounding without heaviness are especially important. Nutrition should gently lead the child into the body, not pull it down abruptly. When this balance is not found, the child oscillates between overstimulation and exhaustion. We must also consider that digestion itself is a form of unconscious willing. Through nutrition, the will is educated long before it becomes conscious. If digestion is constantly strained, the child's will becomes either aggressive or weak. In sensitive children, this often shows itself in sudden emotional outbursts or, conversely, in excessive compliance. Proper nourishment supports the development of a quiet, inwardly firm will that can later become free and self-directed. Thus, when we speak of nutrition for sensitive children, we are not speaking merely of health in the narrow sense, but of the conditions for healthy incarnation. Food becomes a mediator between the child and the world, between the forces of growth and the forces of consciousness. In the next part, we will look more closely at how specific qualities of food influence the balance between the etheric and astral bodies, and how this balance shapes modern hypersensitivity in childhood. To understand why modern hypersensitivity appears so frequently in children today, Steiner directs our attention to a fundamental shift in the way the human being incarnates. The contemporary child enters life under conditions that press consciousness earlier and more forcefully into the bodily organization. The astral body, bearer of sensation and inner movement, does not wait patiently until the physical and etheric foundations are fully established. It pushes inward, seeking experience, perception, and reaction. Nutrition can either moderate this premature descent or intensify it. Sensitive children often show a heightened alertness to their surroundings. Noises, moods, social tensions, even subtle changes in atmosphere affect them deeply. From an anthroposophical point of view, this is not simply psychological sensitivity, but the sign that the astral body is too loosely held by the etheric body. The etheric body, which should provide rhythm, continuity, and protection, is either overtaxed or insufficiently nourished. Food that lacks formative life forces fails to strengthen this protective sheath. As a result, the astral body stands exposed, reacting intensely to every impression. Modern nutrition frequently contributes to this exposure. Highly refined foods, strong stimulants, and substances designed to provoke immediate sensory pleasure draw the astral body directly into the digestive process. The child's organism is forced into a state of inner alertness at moments when it should be inwardly quiet. Over time, this constant engagement erodes the boundary between inner and outer life. The child can no longer withdraw inwardly to regenerate. Everything is experienced too vividly, too closely. For hypersensitive children, this often leads to paradoxical symptoms. They may appear mentally quick, emotionally perceptive, even precociously intelligent, yet struggle with fatigue, sleep disturbances, or emotional overwhelm. Steiner would say that such children are not lacking capacity but balance. Their forces are misallocated. Nutrition that places heavy demands on digestion diverts etheric forces away from growth and stabilization, compelling the astral body to intervene where it does not yet belong. This is why Steiner places such importance on foods that work quietly. Nourishment for sensitive children should not call attention to itself. It should support warmth, rhythm, and continuity rather than excitement. Warm, simply prepared meals help the etheric body establish a steady inner tone. Regularity in eating times gives the organism a predictable structure within which sensitivity can soften and find security. In such conditions, the astral body can gradually retreat from metabolic overactivity and resume its proper role in sensing and feeling. Another key aspect lies in the relationship between digestion and sleep. Hypersensitive children often have difficulty falling asleep or sleeping deeply. From a spiritual scientific perspective, this is closely connected to nutrition. If digestion remains too active, too conscious, the astral body cannot fully disengage from the physical and etheric bodies. Sleep then becomes shallow, and the child wakes unrested. Appropriate nourishment supports digestion in such a way that it can recede into unconsciousness, allowing the astral body to withdraw and renew itself during sleep. We must also consider the emotional climate surrounding food. Sensitive children absorb moods intensely. Tension, haste, or emotional conflict during meals directly disturb their etheric organization. Even wholesome food loses part of its beneficial effect when consumed in a disturbed atmosphere. Steiner emphasizes that the child takes in not only substances, but gestures and states of soul. A calm, caring approach to nourishment strengthens the child's inner sense of safety and trust, which in turn supports bodily balance. Thus, nutrition for hypersensitive children cannot be separated from the wider context of life. It is not a technical intervention, but a formative influence. By supporting the etheric body through gentle, life-bearing nourishment and rhythmic habits, we create conditions in which sensitivity can gradually transform into perceptiveness, empathy, and inner strength. In the next section, we will look more closely at how specific nutritional components influence this process and why modern diets so often undermine it. When we look more closely at the individual components of nutrition and their effects on sensitive children, Steiner's approach reveals a subtle but consistent picture. He does not classify foods as good or bad in an abstract sense, but considers how each substance calls forth activity in the etheric or astral body. For hypersensitive children, the central question is whether nourishment supports the etheric body in its task of building stability, or whether it prematurely draws the astral body into metabolic processes. Foods that are strongly refined or isolated from their natural context demand a great deal of astral intervention. They lack inner form and therefore resist being taken up by the etheric body. The astral body must then step in with forces of contraction, stimulation, and heightened awareness. In a sensitive child, this intervention is felt immediately. The child becomes restless, excitable, or inwardly tense. The organism is forced into a state of vigilance when it should be at rest. Over time, this condition weakens the child's capacity for self-regulation. Carbohydrate-rich foods, when taken in a natural whole form, are particularly important for hypersensitive children. They are closely connected with plant life and carry forces of growth and rhythmic formation. Such foods allow the etheric body to work quietly and steadily. They support warmth, circulation, and inner continuity. When carbohydrates are overly refined, however, they lose this rhythmic quality. Instead of nourishing life processes, they act abruptly, producing rapid shifts in energy and mood. In sensitive children, these fluctuations often appear as sudden excitement followed by collapse. Proteins engage the astral body more strongly than carbohydrates. They are connected with structure, activity, and the shaping of form. In moderation, they support initiative and strength. In excess, however, they burden the astral body and draw it too deeply into digestion. Steiner warns that for children, especially sensitive ones, this can lead to premature intellectualization and emotional tension. The child becomes alert and reactive before having developed sufficient inner grounding. The result is often irritability, sleep disturbance, or heightened emotional sensitivity. Fats play a mediating role. They are connected with warmth and with the deeper processes of incarnation. For hypersensitive children who tend to remain inwardly detached from their bodies, appropriate fats can provide gentle grounding. They help the child arrive more fully in the physical organism. Yet even here, balance is essential. Excessive or poorly integrated fats can dull sensitivity and burden digestion, leading to heaviness or lethargy rather than stability. The question is therefore never one of extremes, but of proportion and quality. Sensitive children often benefit from nourishment that emphasizes gentle, sustaining forces rather than stimulating ones. Food should not sharpen consciousness, but support life. When the etheric body is well nourished, it can gradually take over more of the digestive work, allowing the astral body to withdraw from constant intervention. Sensitivity then loses its defensive character and becomes receptive rather than reactive. Steiner also emphasizes that the way food is prepared matters as much as what is eaten. Simple, careful preparation preserves formative forces. Overly complex, heavily spiced, or aggressively flavored foods awaken the astral body unnecessarily. Hypersensitive children respond strongly to such stimulation, often with emotional or behavioral unrest. In contrast, plainly prepared meals support inner calm and allow digestion to proceed without disturbance. Thus, the nutritional needs of sensitive children point toward a broader principle. The child must be protected from premature awakening. Consciousness will come in its own time. The task of nourishment is to support growth, warmth, and rhythm, so that when consciousness awakens, it finds a secure and resilient foundation. In the next part, we will examine digestion itself more closely and show how modern eating habits interfere with the child's capacity for inner rest and regeneration. To understand the particular vulnerability of hypersensitive children, we must look more deeply into the process of digestion itself. From Steiner's point of view, digestion is not merely a mechanical breakdown of substances, but a process in which the human being continually asserts its own nature against the outer world. Food must be inwardly overcome, transformed from something foreign into something human. This overcoming is a living activity, carried primarily by the etheric body and supported, when necessary, by the astral body. In a healthy child, digestion unfolds largely beneath the threshold of consciousness. The etheric body works rhythmically, loosening substances, guiding them into life processes, and integrating them into growth and renewal. The astral body can remain relatively free, devoted to sensing, feeling, and later to learning and social experience. In hypersensitive children, however, this balance is easily disturbed. The etheric body is often too mobile, too easily depleted, and therefore unable to carry digestion on its own. The astral body is then drawn downward into metabolic activity. When the astral body becomes too deeply involved in digestion, consciousness is sharpened in the wrong place. Instead of awakening gradually in relation to the outer world, the child experiences an inward tension that seeks constant release. This often appears as nervousness, irritability, or exaggerated reactions to small impressions. The child may seem unable to digest experiences just as much as food. Steiner would say that the same forces that should quietly transform nourishment are now overburdened, leaving the soul exposed. Modern eating habits intensify this situation. Meals are often rushed, irregular, and accompanied by strong sensory impressions, noise, screens, emotional tension. Such conditions prevent digestion from sinking into its natural, half-unconscious state. The child's organism remains alert when it should withdraw. For hypersensitive children, this is especially damaging. Their astral body never truly rests. It is constantly pulled between inner metabolic demands and outer impressions. Sleep, then becomes shallow and regeneration incomplete. Steiner emphasizes that warmth is a key factor in digestion. Warmth is the mediator between physical substance and life forces. Cold food, irregular eating, or a lack of inner warmth in the environment weakens digestive activity and further burdens the astral body. Hypersensitive children often show signs of disturbed warmth organization, cold hands and feet, fluctuating energy, difficulty settling. Appropriate nourishment, taken warm and in a calm atmosphere, helps restore the warmth processes upon which etheric stability depends. Another important aspect is the timing of meals. Rhythm allows the etheric body to anticipate and prepare for digestive work. When meals occur at regular times, the organism develops an inner order. In hypersensitive children, this order is not a luxury, but a necessity. Without it, the child lives in a state of constant inner surprise, never fully prepared for what comes next. Digestion then becomes reactive rather than formative, further increasing sensitivity. Steiner also points out that digestion is closely connected to the development of the will. In early life, the will works primarily through metabolic processes. If digestion is continually disturbed, the will becomes either restless or weakened. Hypersensitive children often oscillate between impulsive outbursts and withdrawal. This is not a moral failing, but the expression of a will that has not found a stable bodily foundation. Nourishment that supports calm, steady digestion therefore contributes directly to the formation of a healthy will. Thus, digestion stands at the center of the question of hypersensitivity. It is here that food, rhythm, warmth, and the child soul life meet. When digestion is supported in a way that allows the etheric body to work freely, sensitivity gradually transforms. The child becomes more inwardly held, more capable of withdrawing and re-engaging at will. In the next section, we will turn to modern hypersensitivity as a broader cultural phenomenon and examine how contemporary nutrition amplifies tendencies that are already present in the modern child. When Steiner speaks about hypersensitivity as a widespread phenomenon of modern childhood, he always places it within a larger picture of human evolution. The modern child is not simply more fragile, it is more awake. The forces that once worked quietly in the depths of the organism now rise toward consciousness earlier than before. This is connected with the general advance of humanity toward the age of the consciousness soul. Yet this advance brings with it a danger. The bodily foundations that once carried consciousness instinctively are no longer sufficient. Nutrition, therefore, becomes a decisive cultural factor, not merely a private matter of health. Modern hypersensitivity is often the result of a mismatch between inner development and outer support. The child soul reaches outward with intensity, but the body, especially the etheric body, is not adequately strengthened to receive and contain this activity. Contemporary food culture exacerbates this imbalance. Food is increasingly designed to stimulate, excite, and intensify sensation. Flavors are exaggerated, textures manipulated, and substances isolated to provoke immediate response. For a hypersensitive child, such food does not merely nourish, it assaults the organism. Steiner would say that much modern food bypasses the etheric body and addresses itself directly to the astral body. Instead of quietly supporting life processes, it awakens desire, craving, and reaction. The child is then caught in a cycle of stimulation and collapse. Sensitivity increases because the organism never has the opportunity to consolidate its forces. What appears as intolerance, nervousness, or emotional volatility is often the expression of an organism that has been kept in a state of constant excitation. This explains why hypersensitive children often crave precisely those foods that worsen their condition. The astral body, already overstimulated, seeks further stimulation, yet each such stimulus further weakens the etheric foundation. Steiner would not interpret this as lack of self-control, but as a physiological spiritual imbalance. The task of the adult is therefore not to moralize, but to protect the child's organism from forces it cannot yet regulate on its own. Another aspect of modern hypersensitivity lies in the weakening of formative forces in food itself. Industrial processing strips substances of their living context. Food becomes uniform, standardized, and inwardly dead. The etheric body must then exert great effort merely to maintain vitality. For hypersensitive children whose etheric forces are already mobile and easily depleted, this effort leads to exhaustion. Sensitivity then appears not as heightened perception, but as irritability and fragility. Steiner repeatedly emphasizes that the etheric body needs substances that still bear traces of growth, rhythm, and form. Such substances support inner continuity. Without them, the child's inner life becomes fragmented. Attention wanders, emotions fluctuate, and the capacity for sustained engagement diminishes. Modern hypersensitivity is therefore closely linked with a loss of inner cohesion, a loss that nutrition can either deepen or heal. It is also important to note that hypersensitivity is often misunderstood as purely sensory. In reality, it affects the whole being. Sensitive children frequently show moral sensitivity as well, a strong reaction to injustice, a deep empathy with others, an inability to tolerate harshness. When their bodily foundations are weak, these moral qualities become sources of suffering rather than strength. Proper nourishment does not dull this sensitivity. It gives it a form in which it can be carried. Thus, Steiner's view leads us to a crucial insight. Hypersensitivity is not something to be eliminated, but something to be supported. The task of nutrition is not to blunt perception, but to build the life forces that allow perception to be integrated. When nourishment strengthens the etheric body, sensitivity gradually loses its chaotic character. The child becomes more inwardly held, more capable of filtering impressions, more resilient, without losing openness. In the next section, we will turn to practical implications, how rhythm, preparation, and the overall attitude toward food can become therapeutic for hypersensitive children, supporting their development without forcing premature adaptation to a world that overwhelms them. When we ask how nutrition can become truly supportive for hypersensitive children, Steiner directs us not first to rules, but to gesture and rhythm. The way food is approached, prepared, and offered is as formative as its substance is. Hypersensitive children live with porous boundaries. They absorb impressions, moods, and tensions with extraordinary intensity. For them, nourishment must become an experience of protection rather than intrusion, of continuity rather than surprise. Rhythm is the etheric body's language. Regular meal times, predictable sequences, and repeated gestures allow the child's life forces to organize themselves. When meals occur at irregular hours, or when food is constantly changing in form and flavor, the etheric body remains in a state of alertness. Hypersensitive children then experience digestion as stress. Regularity, by contrast, gives the organism a sense of safety. The body begins to know what is coming, and digestion can unfold quietly without calling consciousness into activity. Preparation of food is equally important. Steiner emphasizes that human intention and care leave an imprint on nourishment. Food prepared calmly, without haste or agitation, supports etheric stability. In contrast, food prepared under pressure or emotional tension often carries this unrest into the child's organism. Hypersensitive children, who are especially receptive to such imprints, may react strongly even to subtle disturbances. What adults may dismiss as insignificant often registers deeply in these children. The sensory environment of meals also plays a crucial role. Loud noise, screens, or emotional conflict during eating force the astral body to remain outwardly engaged when it should withdraw. For hypersensitive children, this prevents digestion from sinking into its necessary half-sleeping state. Calm surroundings, simple presentation, and unhurried eating allow the astral body to step back, freeing forces for perception and emotional life later. Steiner also draws attention to warmth, not only physical warmth, but human warmth. Hypersensitive children often struggle with their warmth organization. They may fluctuate between restlessness and fatigue, between emotional intensity and withdrawal. Warm meals, taken in a caring atmosphere, help stabilize this warmth balance. The child feels held, both physically and inwardly. This sense of being held is essential for healthy incarnation. Without it, sensitivity easily turns into anxiety. Another key aspect is moderation. Hypersensitive children often react strongly to excess, whether of sweetness, stimulation, or variety. Simplicity allows the organism to orient itself. This does not mean deprivation, but clarity. When food is simple and familiar, the child's etheric body can work without surprise. Sensitivity then finds rest, and the child becomes more inwardly available for learning and social interaction. Perhaps most importantly, Steiner would emphasize the attitude of the adult. Hypersensitive children need protection, not pressure. When nutrition is approached anxiously or obsessively, the child senses this tension and internalizes it. A calm, confident approach conveys trust in the child's organism. This trust strengthens the child's own inner confidence. Over time, the child learns to inhabit its body more fully, and sensitivity becomes less overwhelming. Thus, nutrition becomes a form of quiet healing, not through intervention or correction, but through creating conditions in which the child's life forces can gather themselves. In such conditions, hypersensitivity begins to transform. What was once experienced as constant exposure becomes openness with boundaries. What was once fragility becomes refinement. In the final section, we will draw these insights together and look toward the future task of caring for hypersensitive children in a way that honors both their vulnerability and their potential. If we now gather all these considerations into a single picture, hypersensitive children appear not as deficient, but as children who carry within them a heightened openness to the world, an openness that requires strong, quiet foundations in order to unfold healthily. Steiner's view leads us away from the attempt to harden or suppress sensitivity and toward the task of supporting incarnation. Nutrition becomes one of the most decisive means through which this support can be offered because it works directly at the meeting point of body, life, and soul. Sensitive children reveal with particular clarity how deeply nourishment penetrates into the whole human being. What an adult may experience only as digestive comfort or discomfort, the child experiences as mood, tension, or ease. Food that supports the etheric body gives the child an inner sheath, a sense of being held within itself. Without this sheath, impressions from the world penetrate too strongly, and the child lives in a state of continual alertness. Modern hypersensitivity, from this perspective, is not an excess of perception, but a lack of protection. The task of nutrition is therefore to strengthen the etheric body, so that the astral body can withdraw when necessary and engage when appropriate. This strengthening does not come through stimulation, variety, or constant novelty, but through warmth, rhythm, simplicity, and care. When the etheric body is nourished in this way, sensitivity begins to change its quality. It becomes selective rather than indiscriminate, receptive rather than defensive. The child can then meet the world without being overwhelmed by it. Steiner's insights also show that hypersensitivity is inseparable from the broader evolution of humanity. The modern child incarnates into a world that demands early consciousness, rapid adaptation, and constant responsiveness. Nutrition cannot compensate for all these pressures, but it can provide a counterbalance. Through it, the child can find moments of inward rest, continuity, and grounding. These moments are not insignificant. They form the basis for later resilience, moral sensitivity, and genuine empathy. It is crucial to recognize that nourishment works over time. The etheric body responds slowly and rhythmically. Changes do not appear immediately, but they are deep and lasting. When hypersensitive children are supported consistently, their nervousness often gives way to attentiveness, their anxiety to discernment, their fragility to strength. What once appeared as a weakness reveals itself as a capacity that can serve life when properly held. In this sense, caring for hypersensitive children through nutrition is not merely a question of health, but of responsibility toward the future. These children often carry qualities that will be needed in a more conscious, humane culture: sensitivity to others, responsiveness to moral nuance, openness to subtle realities. To support them means to protect these qualities from being consumed by overstimulation and exhaustion. Thus, Steiner's approach to nutrition invites a quiet but profound shift in perspective. Food becomes a gesture of care, a means of offering the child a place in the world that is neither too harsh nor too indulgent. Through such care, sensitivity can unfold as strength. The child can grow into an adult who is inwardly awake without being inwardly exposed, an individual capable of meeting the world with both openness and inner firmness.